So I've been thinking about this video for a while here, and I kind of wanted to go back through and just reintroduce myself as a start for people who may not know who I am. RemanX, and at one time I was top 100 up to, I think, top 10 player at any point in time during the early days of the game, up until about 2023 when I deleted my account in a fit of rage. But that's something we can talk about later. So last year, it's close to a year now. It'll be a year in May. I started a new account with the idea of trying to understand what the new player experience would be like, where Marvel Strike Force was highlighting a lot of its power, and what it would be like to kind of go through the process to build an account towards the end game. So I'm going to go through a couple of high points for you and really go over what I think is really going on with the community, what I think is going on in the economy, and really just an overall function of things that people get wrong. So let's get right into it. So ultimately, I'll give you a quick achievement here. This account has been alive for 326 days. I will say that I got Professor X in under 300 days played, and we'll go through my roster to kind of highlight what I've done here. Give you a full perspective. When the level cap hit, I was level 104 and then hit level 110 with plenty of days left in that milestone if I wanted to bring certain characters up for diamond bonuses, etc. Except I didn't see a lot of value in that. The 110 didn't seem as powerful as obviously G21 and some bonuses do. Combined, they are probably one of the biggest power bonuses we've seen in the game in quite some time. So, a couple of things to break down. You notice I don't hoard energy, I don't hoard cores, I don't hoard. And I think a fundamental thing about this is you kind of get a high from participating in leaderboards, but you're missing other minute details that I think is a bigger part of the economy than people realize. So let's start with my roster. You'll see that realistically, what I've done is you'll see I have favorited characters that have been released since the last big jump. It's post Thunderstrike. We call it PTSD, post Thunderstrike stat deviation. You'll see these characters have quite a bit more stats in general. You don't. Never mind my hodgepodge. I'm leveling. I kept it quite consistent, trying to maintain, where they need to be built up. So, to be clear, I still think Arena is important to build. I think raids are still number one for overall, and we'll get into why. I think Battle World is probably second now, with Arena probably being third and first, depending on where you are in the cycle. If you're in the game and you happen to be in the summertime when the raid team typically refreshes, then you'll have the opportunity to take advantage of that, and that's when they have their highest priority because they're also the highest stat value. Because over time, typically what happens is you start fading some of that team out. And then we'll go into War and then Crucible. And the reason why I say Crucible is it's more of an individual competition. There are some Crucible milestones, but if you think about it, most of what you're going to do in this game is going to be part of 24 between Battle World and War and Raids. You're part of an alliance, and I think that's the big thing we're going to get into, why I think some people struggle with the concept and why it's hard to replicate what other people do. So, first things first. Without my knowledge of the game, I don't think I would have been as successful as I have been for keeping up on the game. I'm in an arena shard where I'm top 10 consistently. I am able to decipher what characters to bring where. So we'll give you a quick idea of my squads, my raid squads. There are some conversation of where is the stopping point for characters. And I'm going to say this, you got to build them to where they need to be to do their job. And sometimes you're going to build higher because they're going to need to have the extra stats to overcome the level differences. And sometimes you're going to need to, you can actually build lower, and we'll go over specific, reasons why these are there. So Champion, in order to do the tier 9 and also get through the spotlight raids, they actually had to build them to this point for me to consistently do this, to be able to sim them without failing. That is only because I have a 4-star Sam and a 4-star Moon Girl. Other than that really was the point where I had to get a mortal weapon. These guys did really well. I brought Lady Bullseye into into the Professor Xavier saga, and they did very well. These guys were doing 9 at 100. So think about this. There's a recommendation out there like build to 105. Well, you don't have to. That isn't always the case. I love Insidious 6. These guys are my city champions in Professor X saga. These guys are a fun team to play, and actually are probably one of my favorite raid teams ever in this game. So when you hit the special on Hobgoblin, it's one of the most rewarding feelings you'll get in a game. All that being said, they don't necessarily have to be this high for the raids. They just happen to be this high for Professor X. Same thing here. You'll look at my choices for Professor X. I typically brought raid teams up. We'll look at the Thunderbolts. So Thunderbolts is interesting. Thunderbolts were one of the teams that was just being released when I came back to the game. And I was able to difficulty 8 consistently with them, 7 with this team here, and 8 with Lady Bullseye before she was, level 100. And the point was, sometimes you can get away with not overbuilding characters. And we kind of want to, because we're like, oh, well, I can throw them on war defense, or I can do, realistically, they don't need to be built that high to be able to get that done. For a new player, being able to go into the Annihilus raids and use this to start getting gear tier 20 before you're level 105 is huge. And I think that's the big thing, is if you're starting this game, you want to try to get to level 95, be able to take these teams in and start doing the harder content, the difficulty 7, 8, and 9 in the Annihilus raids, so you can get that gear tier 20. We'll talk more about that too. Same thing here. There's a benefit from having Elektra die being adjacent to Daredevil over and over again, as long as there's no permadeath. Punisher, for a lot of people, they'll look at this account and they'll go, well, how did you do all the things you did with underleveling? And again, it was just because I'd bring them up. If they failed where they needed to do it, I'd bring them up a little bit more. This does difficulty 9. Not a lot of overinvestment here. So this allowed me to do other things with my account that probably not a lot of people could do. And this is where I'm going to specify that the most important thing to do is to stop building characters once they do what you need them to do. There is no Scopely has us build a 105, because it allows you to pivot when massive changes happen to power. When the power jumps happen, you can start building the newer characters and excelling your roster where you have 20 to 30% more stats than you did in the previous power creep. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in depth too. So Uncanny Avenger, I don't like the team. They're a good team, but they happen to be kind of at the end of where, like I started when Vigilante had just finished coming out. So I really didn't focus a lot on these characters. You'll see I highlighted this. This was the Mystic team. But once I saw that they were going to, and same with Orcus, once I saw they were pivoting away from them and a new tech team was coming out, I quickly pivoted into that tech team. And again, this is one thing I'll go over on Twitch. I'll give you guys some insight about like what I'm thinking. It's the benefit of watching me on Twitch live stream. You can check me once or twice a week. You can always ask me questions in there, but that's really the big difference. So, the way that I've kind of handled this game was I realized that my experience in game development gave me a massive advantage over other players when it came down to game economy. The fact that I've designed and helped give feedback on many games, specifically mobile games, really kind of helped me understand that the economy isn't just about gold. It isn't just about power cores. It's about everything that comes in, your gear, etc. And so it's important to understand where the real value is when you have different currencies and spending. And that comes from a lot of insight. I'll kind of go over this in this video, but I'll make a more in-depth video for everyone coming down the line here. This is more of an overview of how I got to my account here and why I was successful, and in my opinion, in getting a lot of things done. So, in reality, when this event is over with the anniversary, my goal is to have my retcon built up and my Daring Warriors ready to go. I'm not really worried about the Shadow Conclave team, even though they're going to be kind of the Age of Fear Chapter 1. And what I want to show you here is this has kind of been the key for me to understand like what to build. So Chapter 4 Annihilation Wave, it's been kind of important. By the way, Thunderstrike's a good character, very good character, but especially if you can get his passives, he becomes exceptional in the Crucible. Unfortunately, I haven't really focused a lot on Crucible because it's a lot more investment to get the teams to where you're being competitive. And as long as I'm getting a certain degree of the training mats, I kind of had to evaluate whether the investment in those teams was going to yield a higher result for the training mats, and it wasn't. It wasn't getting enough return week to week compared to getting the return from just spending it on energy, which is the most important thing you can spend it on every day. So that's why I actually have an excess of training mats, etc. So minimal spending on this account. Full disclosure, I did spend a little bit. When I was hospitalized, I had some extra Play Store credits that I turned into cash, and I wound up buying the Starjammer because I was trying to get Odin, and they didn't work. But that's a whole nother conversation. So Chapter 4 Annihilation Wave here. These chapters are kind of the gateway. Let me explain that to you. So when it comes down to your ability to kind of see the economy in a different light, it comes from the fact that there are a lot of different objectives that yield additional rewards. You know, right now with the Chapter 8 or the 8-year anniversary, this chapter in the command center has been relatively easy to navigate, but sometimes it's harder. So we'll go into this. So this is important. This raid Warzone milestone is one of the most important milestones you can participate in. Now, sometimes there are character shards there. They have been in a little bit. That might be a permanent change. I don't know. But more importantly, there's gear tier 20. You can get the first 2 premium milestones, which is, you know, gets you, doesn't seem like a ton, but it adds up, for gear tier 20. But what's coming out of this is more important is some of this gear. All right. It is very, very important that you're going to be getting these catalysts, etc., as you push towards gear tier 21. So they kind of give you the pathway here. They don't put you on rails 100%, but the scoring comes from the ability to kind of use your champions in raid, people having the gear tier 20 on the champions. And so over time, you're able to get those characters and meet those raid warstones. So a lot of time people say skip teams. I think instead of skipping teams, look at where you can find, where you can help your alliance achieve some goals. So not only did they need to do this to really overcome their star advantage, it also helped my alliance in getting those milestones consistently. Little things like that, believing you're a small part of a big core, is really going to help you progress your account. What I mean is there are rewards hidden behind following the major beats in this game. And beats is just a terminology that, you know, we use in gaming that basically say these are the content we're driving you towards. This is the stuff we're excited about. This is the stuff that you're putting in games that we want you to participate in. Ever played WoW? One of the major beats in the second expansion was the Sunwell Plateau. And they had kind of an introductory where everybody kind of got the chance to experience Sunwell Plateau, but less than 0.7% ever saw the Muru fight. And so to them, that was kind of a failure. Like overall, you know, that one of the probably coolest design fights, people didn't participate in until after the new expansion had come out. So there's kind of that idea that they don't want content just for Krakens. And you can see that happening here. Like, I'm already in the redacted dimension. I'm in no rush to go through it because I'll get the red stars when I get them. But you don't need the full team built up. You can go in there, conquer it slowly, just like you would any Dark Dimension. The second you have Jeff unlocked, get some characters in there, bring up Jeff, because Jeff is a good character. You can do these little things that help get you more stuff. It's not that hard. All right. You're a new player. I'm coming at you with so much information, you're probably lost. Well, there's a lot of guides that I'll be putting out, kind of just as my experience, what I'm learning, what I'm seeing from stuff coming, because stuff always changes. And that's the problem you're going to have, is change is inevitable, growth is optional. If you want to keep growing your account, you have to understand what's changing and how to adapt to it. You know, I'm not worried about the cores for these characters. I don't core on the characters. In your supply store here, this is very important to understand. I typically get I'll typically get the gear tier 20s here because I'm still bringing some characters up, but you need it for gear tier 21 anyway. I want to have as many of these as possible so that I can pivot some of the characters that might be coming to the game down the road. I'm trying to get as much G21 so I can pivot characters to G20 to get the characters to G21 at a relatively soon. And when G21 comes here, I'll be prioritizing G21 in the shop, as G20 probably lessens elsewhere. But that's just something that you have to understand, that in the early game, when you're 95, you're probably still okay getting character shards. You know, I'll periodically get training modules if I want to hit a certain threshold. It was just to bring up She-Hulk to try to push a little bit more of the retcon. It wasn't crazy. And then, you know, understanding that the value of this, the second you turn, 100 goes a lot higher. So a lot of players were buying character shards, and realistically, it's okay to a certain degree to buy them. But eventually they go here. You know, you're talking from the time that they start here, it's about 3 to 4 months, give or take, before they pop up in the character stores. You know, so between your spotlight raid orbs, your ability to grab them from, just the stores when you want them, you don't necessarily need to go crazy on this currency that's relatively limited, the seasonal currency. So that's about it there. So, full disclosure, started this game, I started in a global alliance. What that means is I was in global chat. I said, hey, I need an alliance. I got the default alliance that was put in there. And then after that, I used the website to find an alliance because I wanted to kind of understand the experience. And then I took that alliance and we merged with another alliance. And now, give you an idea, we are 1912 trophies. So we're in Platinum 4. Hopefully getting a diamond. We're typically in the top 500-ish for war. Sometimes it goes a little bit higher depending on our matchups here. It'll be interesting to see. I have some ideas about the new war matchups here. And then when we look at the Cosmic Crucible, I had a tough one. These were really close. I made a few mistakes. My problem is my phone's broken, so I was playing on my computer. I do think sometimes the web client is a little bit of a problem. But I'm not, like I said, I'm not crazy about my current placement. I'm not necessarily proud of being Platinum 1. I'd love to get up to Diamond and into Masters. But I think that'll just be a product over time. I need a few more breaks to start pulling up some of my teams. Like, just simply being able to bring up a character like Sentry or a character like Magneto would allow me to balance out and get a few more wins, because I guess those single characters get me extra teams here, and once Daring Warriors are ready, I have a full team that can pretty much dominate. But again, they're next on my list, knowing that I don't have to build Shadow Conclave yet. So, yeah, so it's just about basically about prioritizing, knowing where that comes from. You know, I do know we have some extra resources coming in to help me finish up my retcon, and then my Daring Warriors will be probably built by the end of the next 2 weeks. You know, stay tuned. We'll definitely see if I can make that happen here. And you know, it's interesting because it's so easy to get frustrated by what you're not getting in this game and not focusing on what you are getting in this game. We did not have to spend gold or cores to refresh to get our G20. It's always been given in additional milestones and events that we were able to achieve or not achieve depending on our roster. And understanding that whenever those G20 pieces are available and finding them, you know, finding them in the different milestones. You go right to the command center, right? Finding them in the milestones is super helpful to understand that you're getting them from the content you're doing. So that's all. It's important to say that everybody's experiencing some sort of limitation from the release of the High Evolutionary. You know, them being able to potentially punch across on the retcon team is a little bit of a challenge. So it's like, you know, in war, you're highlighting bringing a war team. I think they want to take a look and see how many players are factoring that in. Are they required for a legendary? They might be. The language was a little bit vague when I look at what they said about the team here, was that they would be helpful in pursuit of the legend. So is it more like the chapter stores where they were just, you know, they were going to be part of Milestones or part of, you know, one of the first squads? Again, the same thing that happened with what we saw with Winter Guard, where they're good, but they're not the only team that's going to help you. So if you don't build them right away, you know, will we get a standard release down the road at some point where we get the regular shards? We haven't seen what High Evolutionary will look like, but the core orbs not being there, I don't know, doesn't phase me per se, because everybody who's in my category is free to play is going to have that same challenge. I'm curious to see how it meters out, you know, and has an overall impact. I can't control it, you know, as much as we want to, you know, complain about it. It gives me the opportunity to pivot to some other teams I want to focus on. So that's the best advice I can give you in these challenging times to understand. But that's what, again, one of the goals of this channel is to give you that feedback. Remember, I do things so you don't have to, and I'm free to play, and I guess I'm enjoying the game so you don't have to. Is that the worst way to put this? Oof. Love you much. See you guys again soon.